background, we're delighted to have you here and to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Well, look, it's fantastic to be here, and I'm really grateful to you for the invitation to speak this morning, because it does actually give me the first opportunity to give a major speech on this part of my brief since my appointment as the Shadow Secretary of State for University Innovation and Skills, at a time, I suppose, of considerable change and instability, and at a time when we all have to take stock. And in that context, I know that Universities UK has been a constant voice of good sense and reason. I know that both my predecessor in the role, John Denham, and our former leader on higher education, Gareth Thomas, greatly appreciated your wise counsel and advice. And you might say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Because you're hardly going to say they didn't appreciate what we told them, but it's sincerely held. And actually, though he's not here, I really would like to take the opportunity to thank John, who is a real champion of higher education. And you will all know this because, of course, he brought a huge amount of expertise to bear on the Shadow Business Brief, having previously been, I think, the only Secretary of State for Innovation, Universities and Skills. And both I and Shabana Mahmood, our new Shadow on Universities, want to maintain and grow the close working relationship that John and Gareth had with you. I, of course, shadow Vince Cable. Vince is a bit different to me. He's been around for somewhat longer than me, and in fact a journalist pointed out when I was appointed in October that not only is Vince twice my age, but during his lifetime he has actually been a member of the Labour Party for longer than I have. Pause and reflect. Anyway, notwithstanding the comparisons with Vince, though Shabana and I may not be in government, I think we've got a very important role to play as an opposition, holding the government to account and ensuring that they do right by our students, by the institutions our students attend, by those who work in them, and above all by our country. And I'll come to that because you've obviously just referred to that. And you want this too, which is why that constant dialogue between us and you is absolutely essential. And I suppose the greatest example of this is that obviously we're going to want to work closely with you on the forthcoming bill and the changes that it will bring. Shabana and I will be taking that bill through the House of Commons, so we really will need your help. And we are also going to be making a series of visits to universities in the coming months to listen and learn, and we're looking forward to engaging with as many of you as we develop our policy. And a big thanks to all of you for your help and assistance today. I think we're going to be at Manchester University, actually, my old stomping ground next week. Now, just as there's been change in our team, I know there's been some in yours too, and I look forward to working with Eric Thomas. And I would like to pay tribute as well to the work of Steve Smith before him. I want to pay tribute to you, actually, all of you, in fact, the members, vice-chancellors and principals up and down the country, for the work you do, not just as leaders of your institutions, but also leaders in your communities too. And you preside over a world-class higher education sector with a strong international reputation. Collectively, you represent excellence in teaching and research. The cup of tea has arrived. Your institutions constantly feature, thank you very much, high up in global rankings, as the latest figures demonstrate, and you continue to drive innovation through your advanced research and its application. And, you know, I think this is really lost on people. People forget that HE is our 7th largest export industry. That is not a fact that's often quoted, generating over £59 billion in output and more than 650,000 jobs. You really are drivers of jobs and growth nationally. And the institutions you lead are major employers and important drivers of regional growth too. And with the abolition of the regional development agencies, actually your role regionally is more important than ever. So the bottom line for me is absolutely that universities are integral to our future success as a country. And nowhere was this more evident to me than during my recent trip with Ed Miliband to the Warwick Manufacturing Group, which is, of course, part of Warwick University. In 1980, Professor Lord Kumar Bhattacharya set up the WMG to reinvigorate UK manufacturing through the application of cutting-edge research and effective knowledge transfer. 30 years on, it is continuing to do just that. And we saw that it brings academic rigor together with industrial and organisational practice. And it's an example of how the higher education sector, working closely with industry, can drive growth in the real economy. There are other excellent examples too, like Cambridge Technopole, which is, of course, at the heart and sits within Cambridge University. It provides research and innovation support for high-tech business in that region. There is the University of Abertay at the centre of a video games designing cluster with degree courses providing highly skilled graduates, but also managing a research and development fund for local developers. One of the business advisors who's helping us with our policy review talks extremely positively of the knowledge transfer from Sheffield universities and his bakery business in improving skills and progression and development and productivity improvements to achieve his goal of ensuring that he becomes the best baker in Britain. And I'm sure you would all be able to give me more examples of what your centres of learning are doing to add to that list. And I think these kinds of collaborations and partnerships should be a bigger part of getting growth in our economy and our future success. And that's why it's an essential element of our policy review work. And I should say, we are carrying out the biggest overhaul of our policies since Tony Blair became the leader of the Labour Party in 1994. Later I'll say something about our thinking to date and the principles that are going to guide the development of our policy going forward. Fairness for students, autonomy for universities enabling them to deliver excellence, sustainable funding, and universities playing a central role in the economic as well as the cultural life in regional and national economies. However, before I do this, I really will and must turn to the elephant in the room, and that is the cloud hanging over your futures, what the government is pushing through and where it is getting it wrong. And, you know, I often feel slightly hesitant about going into the politics of these things, but look, I'm strongly of the view politics is nothing if it isn't about society, and universities are a major part of society. So inevitably, it's going to be very much a political issue. And with the anniversary of the vote to triple fees next week, I think it would be worth recapping on what has been, let us say, a challenging year and where we've got to. When the Conservative-led government initially set out its changes to higher education, cutting the teaching grant by 80%, for example, we said what was proposed was unnecessary, unfair, and unsustainable, not good for students or the future of higher education, one of our big success stories as a country. And that's why we asked the government to lay out their plans in full so we could subject them to the necessary scrutiny, because that's our role. So what happened? The vote to triple tuition fees came first before any white paper, surely the wrong way around. Then the changes on access and widening participation were forced out, with subsequent changes to those plans. As fee levels began to emerge with £9,000 looking to be far from the exception to the rule which the government promised, their sums didn't add up, and of course a black hole came into view. First, ministers ignored this and claimed it would all even out in the end, but their miscalculation saw a scramble to claw back in other ways. There were exultations, claims that Offer was now a regulator and would set levels, even threats to universities, with ministers crudely claiming that the fee levels were so high because universities were inefficient. Now let's take a step back and reflect on that particular claim for a moment. In business, companies have to factor in risk and cost it. Now, you are businesses in some respects too, and this government has displayed an abject lesson in creating unnecessary risk for you, I would argue. So the white paper arrives at the end of June this year. When the threats failed, frankly because of the mess they had created, they pulled core and margin and AAB out of a hat, which they then bolted on to the original plans. This is no way to run government policy on higher education, and it's certainly no way to treat our universities. Now, Vince Cable called the dismantling by the government of the regional development agencies, he called that Maoist and chaotic, but it could equally have applied to this other area of his brief. The reforms are not the evolutionary change, I would say, Universities UK has argued for. Institutions have had to make decisions affecting their future viability, not knowing how the rules will change month to month. You are now in the ridiculous position where you have previously set your fee levels and agreed access agreements with offer in April, only to find the rules of the game changed with the white paper. Following its publication, you found you were faced with a deadline to bid for the 20,000 places which were taken from universities and for which you could now bid. The deadline closed before the deadline for revised access agreements to be signed off by offer. 27 institutions resubmitted their access agreements proposing lower fee levels, and 25 today have been told they can change their agreements, according to offer's announcement a few moments ago. We still need to look fully at the detail, but the offer letter confirms there is no evidence on what works best to widen access, fee waivers or bursaries, but the government is still ploughing on ahead nonetheless. Fee waivers, of course, help the government's mess as it reduces the bill. The chaos remains for the students in the university system, a system which gets ever more complex and bureaucratic. If the government had backed our proposal that we put forward at our party conference, which I will get onto in a moment, none of these current access changes, nor core margin, would have been necessary. Nor would quality be under threat. Fees would have been capped at £6,000. The thing is, core margin is designed to reduce the cost of courses to make up for the government originally getting its sums wrong. It isn't for the benefit of students or the higher education sector. And because of this mess, students have applied for courses without knowing the fee levels, making far-reaching decisions about their lives without the information that they need. This is absolutely no way to help our young people get on in life. Then there are the visa changes to Tier 4, the student visa route, which hasn't helped either. As I said, the UK's our seventh largest export is higher education for foreign students, and this was thrown into chaos by the Home Office's changes, which deter foreign students from applying to UK universities. There was little regard to the impact and to the reputation of our HE sector around the world when they dreamed this up. Where was the business department pressing your case? That's a question I would ask. And as an opposition, we recognise the threat that this poses, and I know John worked with you in trying to get the government to recognise the damage it was doing. Overall, though, their reforms are seeking to introduce something more fundamental, a more market-led system, or mini-markets overlaid with a complex and bureaucratic structure. Now, we are supportive of student choice. Within a diverse sector, students currently have a wide range of high-quality options by course and by institution. We welcome the extension of choice that will result from allowing further education colleges the power to award degrees, which will allow people who live in areas that are not near a university to access higher education courses. But this market is beset with problems, and few have said it will work well. There will be intended and unintended consequences. Ministers admitted that there would be institutional failure as a result. There are rightly fears that the reforms will discourage universities from offering science and technology courses and the students from taking up the same at a time when these types of course should be the centrepiece of a future higher education system, as our competitor countries recognise. there are rightly fears that social mobility and access will stall. Aim Higher has been scrapped. The National Scholarship Programme, though described as national, is misleading. It does not have national eligibility criteria, but is more a lottery with students with the same social and economic backgrounds getting different types of benefit depending on where they study, and there's widespread confusion among students as to its purpose. The respected Sutton Trust has said the tripling of fees will reduce the gains made on widening access and social mobility. This is exacerbated by AAB and core margin, which has led to complex access arrangements being crowbarred on to try and correct imbalances. Widening access is very much an afterthought, not an outcome of the new system. Offer, with a hugely expanded role, is still an office of a handful of staff assessing agreements. It is not clear what the sanctions are going to be for universities that do not fulfil their obligations. In fact, UCAS figures have seen a drop in applications to universities, and a variation is emerging across regions, with the northeast seeing the highest drop. What does that say about rebalancing the economy? Also, there are fears that the expansion of for-profit providers will unbalance higher education further and undermine quality. Apollo Group, Kaplan, and the Education Management Corporation have all met with the Higher Education Minister, David Willis. All currently have lawsuits being pursued against them in the US for aggressive recruitment practices and mis-selling of courses. And with the changes that have taken place, we still do not know how much further turbulence will be added to all of this on top. Will there be a further round of core margin, for example? So that's the landscape. And in light of all this, let me pause a second and just pose a few questions. Are the changes to higher education helping to widen access, ensuring that those with the best potential are in our universities? Are they enhancing opportunities? Are they giving stability to universities, to you, to plan and to build on their success? Are they helping our universities compete in the world? Are they helping to put universities at the heart of growth, working with business and government to create future success? Are they working to support the STEM needs of our economy? In all cases, the answer is sadly no. So it is in this context that we are having to think about the future of higher education. Who knows what we would inherit at the time of the next general election, were we to be elected? And I know that you have, of course, worked with government to try and secure a better outcome to the changes. It hasn't been easy. You all want the best for your institutions and the sector. For some, there are silver linings, perhaps the ability to raise more income. Some argued from the start that with the government cutting the teaching grant by 80%, higher fees were the only way. Some perhaps see opportunities flowing from the access changes and bidding for courses. Others, we know, are deeply frustrated with what is going on. So what is our thinking? Well, we must deal with the world as we find it, not as we would like it to be. And this lies behind the policy announced by the Leader of the Opposition, Ed Miliband, at the Labour Party conference in September. First, let me turn to fees. It is absolutely right that graduates make a contribution, period. It underpins the changes we introduced in government and which brought an extra £1 billion into higher education. But this government is now forcing many students to take on debts of more than £40,000, long-term debts and long-term impacts. It strikes at the root of what Ed Miliband has called the promise of Britain, that the next generation should do better than the last. Many families fear that their children will do worse than the generation before. We haven't seen this for a very long time. That's why we have put forward an alternative funding package, reducing the maximum level of fees from £9,000 to £6,000. No university would be worse off under this plan, as any money lost through a reduction in tuition fees would be compensated for. For individual universities, the proposal is revenue neutral. And there would be no need for the core margin system and the uncertainties and mess it creates. With the sums back under control, there would be no black hole from £9,000 fees. I'll explain how it works. Reducing the maximum level of fees to £6,000 while compensating universities for the difference costs £1.1 billion. Now, of that 1.1 billion, 350 million will come from automatic savings from reducing the cap to £6,000, because it means some of the associated expenditure, such as on fee waivers, will no longer be required. £300 million comes from cancelling the government's planned cut to the corporation tax on the banks. And 500 million comes from asking the top 10% of graduates earning over £65,000 in each year of their working life, to pay more through a combination of a higher interest rate from 3 to 4%, and to continue to pay for an additional 2 years if they pay off their loan within 20 years. So this could be implemented now. It would maintain funding for universities, but avoid harm to families and graduates from the government's plans. It would reduce the debt which graduates will be loaded with, and would be an important step towards a more graduate tax-like system, with wealthier graduates being asked to pay more due to the combination of a higher interest rate and time-limited overpayment for 2 years. Our proposal and our approach are guided by our core principles that graduates should make a fair contribution to the cost of higher education, and that those who benefit the most should pay the most. And if by the time of the next election we can do more, then we will. So starting out from the position set out at our party conference this year, we will be looking at further ways to reduce the burden on families and students who have been saddled with high debts, maintain funding for universities, and develop a fairer payment system for graduates. And our policy review will be looking at these issues further. To date, the review and the interim findings which we published a few weeks ago has been focused on the economic challenges we face, which brings me to my second point: international competitiveness and paying our way in the world. We need a new economy which is fair, resilient, competitive, and supports the long term. It needs active, intelligent government working with business to build a vision for the future economy and develop strategies for the sectors for which we have a competitive advantage and where we can compete. It is not business as usual. It is a different approach. Higher education is an essential element of our future success, as I've said, not only as an export sector, as I've laid out, but in terms of training, skilling, and developing what will be part of the future workforce, supporting the research and leading the collaborative work with industry. Your report published yesterday very much supports this view. One of the challenges Britain faces is that the economy has skills shortages at the same time as underutilising the skills we have. We need more companies that can utilise those skills. And that means creating the conditions where we encourage companies to invest in the long term, creating the conditions in which we do not rely on low-skilled, low-paid jobs where we cannot and should not compete. The role of universities is central to increasing our productivity and building a more skilled workforce to bring this new economy about. In 2001, we set a commitment to get 50% of 18 to 30-year-olds entering higher education to go to university. It was ambitious. It was right. It helped focus our collective efforts. It wasn't arbitrary, as some have claimed, but achieved real change. In 1999, 39% of young people went to university, and this grew to 47% in 2009-10. This is a huge achievement, and it happened at a time when we rescued apprenticeships and supported vocational education too. But the target was virtually met when we left office. And a fair question is therefore, what should the future hold? As part of our review, we will be looking at how we can build on this and the best way we can assess ourselves against our competitor countries. I think that has to be the yardstick against which we should judge our progress in the future. It is right in a global world with global markets that we are outward looking in this way. We need to be focused on being among the best in the world, so we need to benchmark ourselves against the best, in my view. Yes, the numbers of young people going into university, but also a broader account too of the quality and types of courses students undertake, which supports our industries and economy of the future in a similar way. as well, the quality and level and take-up of vocational education too. We need to look at the overall skill and education levels of 100% of our future generation and be among the best in the world. That's what it's got to be about. In concluding, let me draw on your report and quote two things to support the arguments I've just made for a new economy, something I can leave you to think about perhaps. In your report, you say, and I quote, countries with high levels of innovation also tend to have, on average, higher proportions of graduates in their populations and a stronger track record of investment in higher education. I think innovation is absolutely key. In your report, you also list the number of Chinese, US, and EU graduates per year in 2010 and the estimates in 2020. We added up the numbers. The increase in per year graduates in China in 2020 compared to 2010 is nearly the same as the total number of graduates in 2020 in the US and the EU combined. So, we need more innovation. The landscape is definitely changing, and together we've got to work to ensure that Britain is set up to meet these new challenges. Thank you very much for listening.